Just to start out with the love scenes in the first week is...
At 61, Diane Lane finally reveals the greatest love of her life. Diane Lane, who once set hearts racing with her raw intensity and effortless grace, now speaks with a soft, reflective voice about the one love that has shaped her more than any script or spotlight. For decades, audiences adored her in films like The Outsiders, Unfaithful, and Under the Tuscan Sun. But behind the captivating performances and poised red carpet appearances lay a deeply personal tapestry of love, loss, and quiet resilience, one she has guarded fiercely until now. Who is the man she calls the greatest love of her life? And why, after 60 years of living in the public eye, has she chosen this moment to share the heartbreaks that nearly broke her and the bond that ultimately saved her? Diane Lane was born on January 22nd, 1965 in New York City into a world of glamour and instability. Her mother, Colleen Farrington, was a nightclub singer and Playboy centerfold, Miss October 1957, whose beauty and ambition lit up the night but left little room for stability. Her father, Burton Eugene Lane, was a drama coach who ran workshops with John Cassavetes, nurturing young talent while driving a cab to make ends meet. Their marriage was passionate but short-lived. They divorced when Diane was just 13 days old. Colleen moved to Georgia, securing custody in Mexico, but Diane remained primarily with her father in Manhattan's Upper West Side. The custody battles that followed were bitter, with Diane shuttled between parents like a prop in a poorly scripted drama. At 6, custody shifted back to her father, and Diane did not speak to her mother for 3 years, a silence that carved deep grooves in her young heart. Growing up in a cramped apartment, Diane learned independence early. Her father, though loving, was often absent, immersed in his coaching work. Diane attended the prestigious Hunter College Elementary School and later the Fiorello H. LaGuardia High School of Music and Art and Performing Arts. But the stage called louder than the classroom. By age 6, she was performing in experimental theater at La Mama, touring Europe with productions like The Trojan Women and Electra. At 12, she made her film debut in A Little Romance, 1979, directed by George Roy Hill, playing a precocious teen falling in love in Paris. The role earned her a Golden Globe nomination for New Star of the Year, and Laurence Olivier called her the new Grace Kelly. But the praise came with pressure. Diane dropped out of school at 16 to pursue acting full-time, a decision that thrust her into adulthood before she was ready. The early losses, the fractured family, the absent mother, left Diane with a profound longing for connection, a theme that would echo through her romantic life. Her relationships were passionate, often intertwined with her career, but marked by the same instability she knew as a child. By 1983, Diane Lane was no longer the girl on the train in A Little Romance. She was 18, she was working, and she was stepping directly into the path of the Golden Boys. But here's the thing about the Golden Boys. They don't fix the trauma you're carrying. They just give it a new set of clothes. First, there was Matt Dillon. In the early 80s, he wasn't just an actor. He was the poster child for the brooding, rebellious American teen. When they worked together on The Outsiders and Rumblefish, the chemistry wasn't a choice. It was a collision. They were two young, beautiful people who were both desperately trying to escape their own upbringing. The tabloids called them the Golden Couple, but that term is a heavy, synthetic thing. They were teenagers playing house. They were constantly in the crosshairs of a fame that neither of them had the tools to handle. Their romance was a whirlwind of youth and adrenaline, but it was fundamentally flawed. They were both running away from something. He was running from his own reputation, and she was running from the ghost of a mother who left her behind. When the cameras stopped rolling, they didn't have the foundation to build a life. They only had the heat of the moment. It faded exactly as it should have, swiftly, without a grand explosion. Just two kids realizing that their intensity was a shared symptom, not a shared future. Diane later reflected on it with fondness, but no regret, calling it a learning experience in the complexities of love under the spotlight. Then came the what if that still keeps fans up at night. Tom Cruise. Before he was the global blockbuster titan, he was just 21 years old, a kid with a billion-watt smile and a drive that scared the hell out of everyone else on the set of The Outsiders. There was a connection there that went deeper than a casual, on-set fling. It was raw, magnetic, and completely public. The media circus surrounding them was suffocating. Every time they were seen together, the rumors started, and they were relentless. It was the thrill of the unknown. They were both rising stars, both feeling the tectonic plates of their own potential shifting beneath them. But here is the tragedy of that time. They were too busy becoming names to ever become a us. In 1984, Diane Lane made a symbolic splash. Streets of Fire, a gritty, mesmerizing rock opera. As Ellen Aim, she wasn't a demure movie star. She was a rock queen, kidnapped in the city that never sleeps. This was the pinnacle of the rebellious girl image Hollywood craved. The film wasn't just entertainment. It was a mirror reflecting Diane's weariness with the ladylike image the public imposed on her. She truly was a real-life Ellen Aim, a woman caught between the glare of the public spotlight and the need to find a personal escape. And when the lights of Streets of Fire fade, Jane steps into Jon Bon Jovi's arms. They met during an MV shoot, amidst the pungent smell of leather and rock and roll smoke. John didn't see her as a star. He saw her as a fellow traveler. They were two young souls, hunted by fame, finding solace in tours and nameless hotels. For Jane, Jon Bon Jovi was not a painful lesson, but a note in the symphony of freedom. He represented the freedom she could never have. They were once the couple every magazine coveted, a combination of refined beauty and gritty rock and roll energy. But this romance was like John's song, intense, fiery, but not written to be an eternal anthem. By the late 80s, the It Girl carousel had stopped being fun. It had become a prison. Diane was tired of being the pretty prop in a man's world, a woman whose brain was being ignored while her looks were being sold to the highest bidder. She was 23, world famous, and completely empty. She did the only thing a girl looking for an exit could do. She bought a one-way ticket to Paris. She wasn't looking for a vacation. She was looking for a version of herself that didn't exist in the California sun. It was in the labyrinthine alleys of the French capital that she stumbled into the orbit of Christopher Lambert. He was a French-American actor who had just exploded onto the scene as the lead in Greystoke, The Legend of Tarzan. He wasn't like the boys she'd left behind in L.A. Lambert was brooding, intense, and carried a permanent shadow that felt incredibly sophisticated to a woman starved for depth. Their meeting was a collision of two people who were both hiding in plain sight. Lambert was an outsider in his own industry, and Diane was a star who felt like an alien in hers. She was drawn to him because he didn't try to fix her. He simply mirrored her own sense of dislocation. They were two beautiful drifting souls who found a frantic kind of safety in each other's arms. But the marriage, which began in 1988, was a classic case of mistaken identity. They weren't building a life, they were building a barricade against a world they both loathed. The reality of their union was a slow-motion crash. They were constantly separated by time zones, language barriers, and the grueling demands of two ambitious acting careers. Every time they managed to be in the same city, they were living in different worlds. When their daughter Eleanor was born in 1993, the distance became absolute. For a woman who had spent her childhood being passed between a distant father and a missing mother, the cold bed in a silent Paris apartment was a nightmare she had already lived through. By 1994, the facade didn't just crack, it crumbled. They didn't divorce because of a tabloid scandal. They drifted apart because the reality of us was far less romantic than the dream of escape. Diane walked away from the marriage with a daughter in her arms and a new, brutal realization. You cannot run away from your life to find yourself, because wherever you go, you're still the one doing the running. It was a painful, necessary collapse that forced her to stop looking for a savior and start looking at the woman in the mirror. In 2002, she reunited with Richard Gere for Unfaithful. This wasn't just a movie, it was a psychological exorcism. 20 years after they shared a screen in the Cotton Club, they were back together, playing a couple trapped in the suffocating wreckage of infidelity. The chemistry between them wasn't something they practiced in a studio, it was something they brought with them. Off-screen, the lines started to blur. They shared a brief, intense affair during the promotion of the film, a collision of two people who had known each other since they were hungry nobodies in the 80s. It felt like a homecoming, a final attempt to grasp the what could have been. But Richard Gere was a man as elusive as the smoke in a film noir. He offered her a spark of passion, but he couldn't offer her a life. When Diane looked at him, she didn't just see a co-star. She saw the temptation of a life she couldn't have, and the pain of being used as a temporary sanctuary. She realized that these collaborators, these men she kept falling for, were never going to be the home she had been building since she was 6 years old. They were just passing ships in the night. The Oscar nomination for Unfaithful was a massive victory, a moment where the industry finally bowed to her brilliance. But at home, she was still the same girl from Pennsylvania, sitting in the silence, realizing that being the most sought-after woman in Hollywood didn't protect you from the crushing weight of being truly alone. She had given her best years to men who were either too distant, too broken, or too addicted to their own brilliance to ever truly see her. She had played the wife, the lover, and the muse. Now, she was finally ready to face the fact that the only person who could ever save Diane Lane was the one staring back at her in the mirror. By 2004, Diane Lane had reached the point where she was done with the pretty boy illusions. She had survived the French stoicism of Christopher Lambert and the enigmatic intensity of Richard Gere. She didn't want a co-star anymore. She wanted a mirror. And she found exactly that in Josh Brolin. When they started dating, Hollywood buzzed about the power couple energy. But the public had no idea what was actually happening behind the closed doors of their home. They were two broken people who had spent their entire lives running from the same ghosts. Like Diane, Josh had grown up with a famous father, James Brolin. And like Diane, he had spent his life feeling like he was living in a shadow. They were both children of the industry who knew the hollow, metallic taste of a life lived for the cameras. It was a connection so profound that it felt like a survival pact. For 9 years, they were each other's witness. Josh wasn't just a husband. He was a guy who understood the specific, suffocating pressure of being Diane Lane. He knew why she turned down roles. He knew why she went silent for months at a time. He was the one person she didn't have to perform for. And for a woman who had spent 50 years being a pretty prop for other men, that level of intimacy was dangerous. It was addictive. But here is the jagged truth that the glossy magazines never printed. You cannot build a home out of two people who are both currently burning down. Josh Brolin was fighting his own demons, addictions, temper, and the crushing weight of a family name. Diane was fighting the memory of her mother's vanity and her own history of being used. They were like two tectonic plates grinding against each other. When they were good, they were magic. They were the only two people on earth who truly understood the price of their own existence. But when the pressure spiked, when the box office didn't deliver, when the paparazzi circled, when the old ghosts of addiction and insecurity whispered too loud, the house didn't just rattle, it broke. The headlines about Josh's arrests for domestic battery and DUI weren't just celebrity news. They were the final deafening confirmation that the sanctuary Diane had built was no longer safe. The public saw a scandal. Diane saw her childhood repeating itself. She saw the cycle of volatility she had been trying to outrun since she left Pennsylvania at 16. In 2013, after 9 years of trying to be the savior in a house of mirrors, Diane filed for divorce. It was the most difficult decision of her life. She didn't leave because she stopped loving him. She left because she was drowning. And yet, here is the secret that shocks everyone. They remained family. Even after the lawyers packed up and the dust settled, the broken pieces didn't scatter. In recent reflections, Diane has spoken about him with a level of grace that is unheard of in this town. She calls him family. She supported him through his own path to sobriety and redemption. She realized that while they were a failure as a married couple, they were a triumph as two souls who had helped each other survive the hardest decade of their lives. She didn't regret the 9 years. She mourned them. She realized that Josh Brolin was the man who taught her that even if a relationship ends in flames, you can still walk away with your dignity intact, provided you are brave enough to let go before you lose yourself entirely. Today, at 61, if you ask Diane Lane what the greatest luxury is, she won't mention fancy dresses or million-dollar contracts. For Diane, luxury is the quiet of the morning when no one demands she be the muse or the lover. Many people once thought her career would end at 50, that the name Diane Lane would become just a footnote in film history. But with admirable resilience, she has created a new chapter for herself. Films like Feud, Capote versus The Swans, 2024, or A Man in Full, 2024, are not just work. They are the declaration of an artist who has truly reached the threshold of freedom. She no longer races for box office rankings, nor does she fear being replaced. She acts because she loves the craft, and, more importantly, she acts because she has made peace with herself. Diane's fulfillment now lies in her small house in rural New York. There are no paparazzi flashbulbs, only nature and the people she truly loves. Her greatest legacy is not the photos on the red carpet, but the maturity of her daughter, Eleanor Lambert. Seeing Eleanor become a strong social activist, a woman who doesn't need to live in the shadow of her father or mother, is proof that the chain of family tragedies she endured has ended. Jane is no longer the little girl caught between her parents' warring fronts. She has become a stable anchor for her child. Audiences always wondered how, after so many betrayals, so much hurt, after being labeled by the world as a plaything, did Diane manage to keep her eyes so clear? The answer is simple. She stopped trying to fix men. She learned that being with someone did not have to be the ultimate goal in life. Her fulfillment at age 61 came when she realized she didn't need to be half of anyone to be complete. She owns an estimated $40 million in assets. No small sum, but she chooses a simple, quiet life. She chooses to protect what she values most. She doesn't need a century-long wedding or the media hype to prove she's happy. Diane Lane's happiness today is a quiet kind of happiness, the happiness of someone who has stepped out of battle, shed her armor, and finally dared to sit down, put down her glass, and breathe a sigh of relief. Diane Lane's life is a mirror reflecting our own. Scars do not define you, but they add depth to your soul. She teaches us that it is never too late to start over, and it is never too late to choose an ending you deserve. If you find Diane Lane's journey of self-discovery comforting, please like and subscribe to our channel. Every subscription is a source of motivation for us to continue our journey of uncovering the dark sides, tragedies, and miraculous revivals of cinema legends. Thank you for listening, and see you in the next story.